Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's live stream. We are covering chapter 11 of the compendium. This is the third and final chapter of the Antebellum era. And this chapter covers the presidential administrations of William Henry Harrison, Tyler, and Polk. And it includes the Mexican American War. And so this is what our chapter page looks like on our website. Our website, if you want to follow along, is www.tarpeia.us. Tarpeia is spelled Tarpeia.us. And I have a link in the description of this live stream. And yeah, let's get into it. So each chapter has its own page, like what you see here, and then each chapter is further divided into sections. Each section has its own interactive timeline, like what you see here, and what's on the timeline are primary source documents and events. So we combine the two. So it's a library, but in the format of an interactive and visually engaging timeline. And so this first section, which is called Tippecanoe and Tyler 2, the campaign slogan of the time. This covers 4 years of history from 1841 to 1845, and this covers the administration of William Henry Harrison and Tyler, mostly Tyler, since William Henry Harrison dies pretty early on. And so I've written a short description of this entire section, which is William Henry Harrison's presidency ended after just 1 month with his sudden death, placing John Tyler into office and igniting a constitutional debate over presidential succession. Tyler decisively resolved by claiming the full powers of the presidency. The Whig agenda of restoring a national bank, expanding internal improvements, reforming tariffs, and strengthening congressional authority collapsed as Tyler repeatedly vetoed legislation, shattering his party and governing without effective political allies. As economic recovery lagged, westward expansion accelerated with the opening of the Oregon Trail, intensifying debates over land, infrastructure, and the future balance between free and slave states. The national conversation over slavery sharpened as Frederick Douglass delivered his first major public anti-slavery speech, the start of a long career in the abolition movement. Congress repealed the gag rule. The abolitionist voices gained wider legitimacy. Meanwhile, border tensions with Mexico deepened over Texas and western expansion, laying the groundwork for war. So we have William Henry Harrison's inauguration, which was March 4th, 1841. You have the United States v. the Amistad, which here we have a video by Mr. Beat. This video is one of his Supreme Court briefs summarizing the case. So check out his channel and subscribe. We have the death of William Henry Harrison on April 4th, 1841. He died in Washington, D.C., just 31 days after his inauguration, most likely from complications related to pneumonia. His death made him the first U.S. president to die in office and triggered the first real constitutional test of presidential succession, firmly establishing that the vice president becomes president, not merely an acting executive. So Tyler will give his first address as president, asserting that he has the full powers of the presidency. Tyler's message to Congress on westward expansion and financial security. Tyler's message introducing a bill on bankruptcy. An act for the government to borrow $12 million. Tyler's veto message of an act to establish a federal bank. So the Whigs will be trying to establish a federal bank. Tyler will veto that bill. You have the Uniform Bankruptcy Act of 1841. This is the same act that Tyler introduced on bankruptcies. an act to sell government land and use the proceeds on internal projects. So a lot of the debate was on, when it comes to infrastructure, was who's going to pay for it. And so the federal government at this time decides to sell government land cheaply, and the proceeds will then pay for infrastructure projects. Tyler's veto message of a second attempt to establish a federal bank. All of Tyler's cabinet resign except Daniel Webster. The cabinet consisted of Whigs from the Harrison administration, and major policy of the Whigs was a federal bank, which Tyler vetoed twice. So the vetoing of the national banks is what led to most of his cabinet resigning. And that was on September 11th, 1841. Congressional Whig resolution condemning Tyler. Proclamation against American criminals entering into Canada. This is the first public address by Frederick Douglass. It's called "I Have Come to Tell You Something About Slavery." And I made a video of me reading the address. It's pretty interesting, and I would definitely encourage you guys to check out my channel, subscribe, and also watch this video and share it with people. Tyler's 1841 State of the Union address. Tyler's message on the border dispute with Texas. Excuse me. A Supreme Court decision, Prigg v. Pennsylvania. Tyler's message on the border issues with Canada. Tyler's message to Congress on the power of appointment. So Tyler is appointing new members of cabinet, and he's having trouble getting them approved by the Whig Senate. Tyler's message to Congress on the financial situation. You have Dorr's Rebellion, an attempt by residents to force broader democracy in the state of Rhode Island. Led by Thomas Wilson Dorr, the movement mobilized his followers to demand changes to the state's electoral rules. Rhode Island was still using its 1663 colonial charter as its de facto constitution, which required land ownership as a qualification to vote. The rebellion established a parallel government alongside the existing chartered government and wrote a new constitution for Rhode Island. The rebellion ended following the failed attempt on May 17th to capture an arsenal and seize weapons. Dorr himself became a fugitive. Although the rebellion failed, it forced the rewriting of the state constitution to expand voter eligibility. Tyler's message on the conflict in Florida with Indians. The Apportionment Act of 1842. Tyler's message approving the Apportionment Act. Representative John Botts, a Whig, introduces articles of impeachment against John Tyler. Tyler will veto a tariff bill. You have the Webster-Ashburton Treaty. You have the House Select Committee reports on Tyler's abuse of the veto power. House vote on a constitutional amendment. The amendment would change the vote required to override a presidential veto from 2/3 majority to a simple majority. The vote was 98 to 90, less than the required constitutional majority of 2/3. So this constitutional amendment does not get passed. Black Tariff of 1842. Tyler's response to the House report. Tyler's 1842 State of the Union. His message to Congress on trading with China. An address to the non-slaveholders of the South on the social and political evils of slavery by Lewis Tappan. Impeachment fails. So, not only does the amendment fail, but now the impeachment fails as well. The impeachment of John Tyler. Tyler's message to Congress on the border conflict with Mexico. The Telegraph Act. This will provide infrastructure for the telegraph, which will be opened during, I believe, Lincoln's administration. Rhode Island Constitution, 1843. So this is the same constitution that will be established by following Dorr's Rebellion a couple years prior. First major wagon train to Oregon. Over 100 wagons depart Independence, Missouri, destined for the Oregon Territory. So now you have the Oregon Trail going on. You have Tyler's 1843 State of the Union, Tyler's message to Congress on improving the Navy. You have the Princeton incident, where Secretary of State, Secretary of the Navy, and others die in an accident on the USS Princeton when a gun misfires. This is probably the worst incident ever to befall the cabinet of the president in U.S. history, where 2 cabinet members die and a bunch of other people die from a gun misfiring. Tyler's message about the Princeton incident. Tyler's message on the violence in Rhode Island. This is violence over the new Constitution. Treaty to annex Texas sent to the Senate. Tyler's message on the treaty with Texas. The Whig Party platform. This is the first time that the Whig Party will publish their own platform. And this is not the first party platform to be published. That would be the Democratic Party platform in the previous chapter. But now we have the Whig Party making their policies known. So if you're interested in learning about what the Whig Party believed in, I made a video of me reading the Whig Party platform. The first telegraph line is established between Baltimore and D.C. The Democrats nominate Polk for president. National Democrats nominate Tyler. Texas annexation fails. First time. Tyler's message on the failed annexation of Texas. Veto of improving infrastructure. First trade treaty with China. Tyler withdraws from the presidential race, and he will endorse Polk, the Democratic nominee, not the Whig nominee. So the Whigs are pretty much screwed. And so the Whigs will choose Henry Clay, while Polk is the Democrat nominee. Tyler's 1848 State of the Union. You know, the House gag rule, Resolution 21, is repealed. Repealed is proposed by John Quincy Adams, who was a member of the House at this time. He was the president, then he went back to being a House, and he spoke out against the gag rule on slavery. Now, a lot of people get this wrong about the gag rule. The gag rule does not say that no one can talk about slavery in Congress. First of all, this is only the House, it doesn't include the Senate. And also, it's not about talking. Anyone can talk about slavery. It's about proposing legislation that touched on the issue of slavery, especially to limit slavery. That was the gag rule. It wasn't on talking, it was on proposed bills. So hopefully that clears up the history. So people can still talk about slavery in the House. They just couldn't propose a bill limiting or restricting slavery in any way. Tyler's message on the border conflict with Mexico. Tyler's message on trade with China. Tyler's message on the illicit slave trade. And then you have the resolution to annex Texas. The admission of Florida and Iowa. So Florida and Iowa are now states. Now we go to Young Hickory. This section, from 1845 to 1849, covers a 4-year period, and this is the Polk administration. So you have Old Hickory, which is Andrew Jackson. Young Hickory is Polk. People called him Young Hickory. So Polk's presidency was defined by territorial expansion, war, and intensifying sectional debates. The annexation of Texas and the subsequent Mexican-American War extended U.S. territory to the Pacific, fulfilling Manifest Destiny and prompting fierce debate in Congress over whether new lands would allow slavery. At the same time, America faced economic and social transformations. The California gold rush began, and the Irish potato famine drove mass immigration, reshaping northern cities and labor markets. Reform movements gained momentum, highlighted by the Seneca Falls Convention of 1848, advocating women's rights, while slavery opponents, including Frederick Douglass, challenged pro-slavery arguments from leaders like John C. Calhoun, who demanded new slave states. Polk's presidency thus combined the triumphs of expansion with the rising tensions that leads to the sectional crisis. You have Polk's inaugural address on March 4th, 1845. Then you have Mexico ends diplomatic relations with the United States. So now that there's conflict with Mexico, not yet war, but war is coming. You have Andrew Jackson. He dies on June 8th, 1845. You have General Zachary Taylor is sent to the Rio Grande. Annexation by John O'Sullivan. This is where we actually get the term manifest destiny. So this guy coins it in this essay. And so all that manifest destiny is reaching the Pacific and establishing states all the way on the Pacific coast. So from sea to shining sea, that's a later phrase. That is all that manifest destiny is originally, how that term was used originally. But the broader concept of manifest destiny will go on for many decades after this when it comes to the actual establishment of filling all this Western territory with states. And even going further past the continental U.S., getting Alaska, getting Hawaii, getting the Philippines for a short period of time. And so Manifest Destiny, as it was originally used, was simply getting California and turning it into a state, reaching the Pacific coast. Now you have the start of the Great Potato Famine in Ireland, starting sometime in September 1845. A disease will destroy many potato crops just in time for harvest, and it will lead to mass starvation in Ireland, and many Irish will leave Ireland and head to America. You have Polk's 1845 State of the Union address. Polk announces to Congress that Texas has approved of annexation, so now Texas is going to be admitted as the 28th state of the Union, and this will lead us to war with Mexico. Polk's message to Congress requesting more military support at the southern border, now that Texas is a state. Polk's message to Congress on taking Cherokee land. First American-U.S. military clash happens in April of 1846. General Taylor, wins the Battle of Palo Alto. General Taylor wins the Battle of Resaca de la Palma. Polk's war message to Congress. This is him asking Congress to declare a state of war with Mexico, even though the fighting has already happened. The Senate declares war on Mexico on May 13th, 1846. Joint occupation of Oregon by Britain and U.S. ends at the same time as the start of the Mexican-American War. So now, not only are we competing with territory in the southern border, we are now competing for territory in the northwestern border as well. You have the Wisconsin Enabling Act to establish it as a territory. Oregon Treaty signed. This establishes the 49th parallel as the border with Britain, Canada. Oregon Treaty ratified by the Senate in June. An act retroceding 36 square miles from D.C. to Virginia. So if you look at a map of Washington, D.C., it's supposed to be a perfect square, 10 miles by 10 miles. But, split between Maryland and Virginia. However, in 1846, the Virginia part of D.C. will be retroceded back to Virginia. So it was Virginia's, then it became D.C.'s, now it's Virginia's again. I don't think they should have done this, and I think really they only did this to allow slavery in Alexandria area, because that area today is now Alexandria and a few other places, and so that's probably why they did it. I'll have to look up the actual congressional debate and see what the argument was. See, the Walker Tariff Reduction Act. So this is to reduce the tariffs, the tariff rates. Proposal to open peace negotiations with Mexico. It's only been a couple months, but peace is already being talked about. You have the Wilmot Proviso. You have the General Taylor captures Monterey in September of 1846. Polk's 1846 State of the Union Address. Iowa is admitted as the 29th state. You have the Battle of Rio San Gabriel. General Taylor wins the Battle of Buena Vista, effectively ending the war in northern Mexico. So Taylor, he's like winning every single battle, and this will move the fighting down south to around Veracruz and Mexico City. Veracruz occupied by U.S. states in March of 1847. Polk's northeastern tour, where he visits a bunch of northeastern states. You have Major General Winfield Scott. So Taylor is in the north, Winfield Scott is in the south, and he wins the Battle of Molino del Rey. He will then win the Battle of Chapultepec, and then he will capture Mexico City. You have the Whitman Massacre. Cayuse Indians attack the Whitman Mission near Walla Walla in Oregon Territory, killing 14 settlers. Polk's 1847 State of the Union Address. Polk's pocket veto message of the Wisconsin Territory Internal Improvements Bill. Gold is discovered at Sutter's Mill, California. This is a recreation of Sutter's Mill, but this is probably what it looked like, and it's not much to it, but gold is discovered here, and this will lead to the California Gold Rush. You have the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. John Quincy Adams dies right after. He collapsed and died in the House of Representatives after suffering a stroke. Former president turned congressman, he became the leading moral voice against slavery. Wisconsin State Constitution, 1848. Polk's message regarding native hostilities near Columbia River. That's the Oregon Territory. Or the Washington Territory, just north of Oregon. It's now being organized into Washington. Wisconsin admitted as the 30th state. Polk proclaimed Mexico Treaty in effect. The cornerstone of the Washington Monument is laid by Polk. Seneca Falls Convention, organized by Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Lucretia Mott, and attended by about 300 people, including men like Frederick Douglass, who supported women's rights. Its adoption of the Declaration of Sentiments demanding equality and women's suffrage marked the formal beginning of the organized women's rights movement in the United States. So women's suffrage begins officially here at the Seneca Falls Convention. And this is the document that they all passed, called the Declaration of Sentiments. And Frederick Douglass, in his newspaper called the North Star, will write an essay supporting the rights of women. Territory of Oregon is established. Calhoun's speech on the Oregon Act. You have election of Taylor. So this is Zachary Taylor, the same general who won in the northern half of the Mexican-American War. So he's very famous at this point. Martin Van Buren is still kicking and trying to become president again. And Lewis Cass. So 3 candidates run. And again, this is a video by Mr. Beat summarizing the election. You have Polk's 1848 State of the Union. You have the William and Ellen escape. William and Ellen Craft escape slavery in Macon, Georgia. Ellen, who is light-skinned, disguises herself as a white male planter traveling with an ailing enslaved tenant, William. After settling in Philadelphia and then Boston, the Crafts began lecturing on abolition, recounting their escape and life under slavery. Their memoir, Running 1,000 Miles for Freedom, is published around 1860. It becomes a widely read first-hand account of enslavement and their extraordinary escape, but also lecture in England and Jamaica during this period. You have the Southern Address by John C. Calhoun, and he will talk about how slavery needs to be fully protected and recognized. And Frederick Douglass will make a response to this address, and he calls it the Address of John C. Calhoun and 40 Other Thieves by Frederick Douglass. Very scathing essay against John C. Calhoun. And you have the Organic Act of Minnesota, so Minnesota is becoming a territory. And then you have the Department of the Interior is established, which includes the Patent Office, the Office of the Census, Military Pension Officers, Indian Affairs Office, General Land Office, Office of Mines, Office of Public Buildings. That's resource mines, not explosive mines, and Office of Public Buildings. And that concludes this chapter on Manifest Destiny from 1841 to 1849. This is chapter 11 of the Compendium, the third and final chapter of the Antebellum era. And so I definitely encourage you guys to check out our website. It's best viewed on desktop or laptop, by the way. And it's called, the domain is www.tarpeia.us. Tarpeia is spelled TARPEIA.us. My name is Mark Shubert. I am the founder and chair of Amending America. That's the name of the charity. Tarpeia is just the website name. And so I encourage you guys to support our charity. We are 501c3. All donations are tax deductible. And you can donate to us on our donate page. And you can also sponsor an era and get your name on the page itself. And if you're looking through the timeline and you're trying to find a specific document and you're having trouble navigating the timeline, you can scroll down to the master index and you can filter out search results. Now, the master index is still being worked on. It's not up to date, but you can use it to hopefully find what you're looking for. And also in the master index, I started creating these bios and what the bio will look like. It's going to be much more detailed than this. This is just a proof of concept, but each bio will have an interactive timeline of the person's life. And so you can see, just a timeline of their life. And then I'll be adding as many primary source documents as I can to each of the bios as well for the single person that the bio covers. And so I only have a few bios right now, but pretty much every single person that we mention in the entire compendium, eventually I would want to have a bio for. And there's a lot of people, thousands and thousands of people that we mention. So that's going to take a while. So thank you for watching, and I hope you learned something new of our old history. And I hope to see you tomorrow. For tomorrow's live stream, we will have a guest. His name is Dr. Joseph Hall Patton, and he, on YouTube, goes by the name The Cynical Historian, and he and I will be looking over Chapter 12, which is the sectional crisis. So I'm excited for tomorrow's live stream. So thank you again for watching, and I hope to see you tomorrow. Please support our charity if you can, and have a nice day.